Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Stoa, another edition of Unsaving the World, Doing Good Without Burning Out with Michael Smith. This is part 2 of 3 in his Sense Maker in Residence series. Part 1 was pretty awesome, so I'm looking forward to part 2. Same drill as last time. It's going to be quite informal. I'm going to tag Michael in, and then he's going to run the show. And I think we're here for 60 to 90 minutes. So just to be mindful of that. I kind of want to plug something though before I hand it over to Michael. Let me just share my screen. So we're having a symposium at the Stoa coming soon. And let me just put it up. Boom. Let us maybe make the meta crisis our superordinate goal. And see that word maybe? The reason why that's there is because of Michael in his series. And so Michael's series is leading up to it. His ends on March 15th, and we're going to have the symposium. There's about 6 sessions. We might have more. It's full about kind of like talking about the existential risk landscape, doomsday curve, the history of like doomsaying and thinking in that way, and then how the environmental movement is pretty messed up too. We're going to have a session on that. So lots of fun stuff to help us be to practice our embodiment. So I wanted to just set that frame that this series is building up to that. So that being said, got your work cut out for you, Michael. Now I'm gonna take you in. Welcome back.
Awesome, thanks. Cool. So yeah, I see some people are replying here. I'd love to start by getting a feeling for where you all are in your bodies right now. How are you feeling? What are the sensations you've got? I type it in the text, but an example for me is right now I'm feeling a lot of energy, a kind of buzzing going through my core, going into my arms and down about halfway into my thighs. A kind of a bit of a light going on in my heart, like a almost like a lighthouse beam is trying to come out of the front of my chest. So it's feeling kind of tickly and fun and warm for me. So just type something out so I can get a feel of where y'all are right now. Feeling anxiety breathing into sad heart opening. Tension in abdomen, fluttering feeling in throat. I won't go read all of these. These go too quickly. This is great. Jittering knot in my tummy. Great, that's perfect. Facial tension. Yeah, for me, I've been noticing, particularly over the last couple of weeks, how when I am angry or when I am nervous, I will smile. And so there's this question of, well, what am I doing with my face? It gives me a way to relate to, well, what is the energy in my body that causes my face to light up like that, to cover my actual authentic expression of emotion? Not to say it's bad, just to recognize, oh, well, something happens and I'm not conscious of it. Tired head, bouncy chested, a here-ness. That's great. Okay. Energy moving from chest up to throat. Relaxed, hungry. Yes, hungry is an important one. Tense shoulders, smile when I see familiar faces. Yeah, it's kind of an excitement for me too. I also get an excitement of seeing unfamiliar faces. I get this egoic thrill of, ooh, I have to impress them. There's like a shock going through my heart across the bottom of my rib cage. Okay, great. Thank you. I guess so. I have some reasonably clear ideas about where I want to go with today's session, but it's important for me to start with what is real and what is present. If I come in with this idea and this sort of fog in my mind, and then I project the fog at you, then I'm not speaking to you, I'm speaking to figments of my imagination. So this gives me a way to feel something of what's going on for you and what is real right here and now, where action is actually possible. So could I just get, oh, this is going to be tricky. I think because only about half-ish, is that true? About half-ish? About 2/3 of you, it looks like, have the picture on. So could you just put yes or no in the chat, just so that I know, were you here last week? Okay. Oh yeah, or if you saw the video, that's helpful to know too. Great. Okay, so most were here. All right, I'll respect those who weren't here last time. Well, we should be able to navigate that. So uh, let's take a moment to ground, to take those sensations. I just want you to first check, having checked in with the sense in your body, where your body is. And take a long inhale. Notice how that affects your body. And then if you can, a longer exhale. And just take a few moments and normal breaths to notice what effect that has. And try that again. Inhale. Longer exhale. We'll go into the why for this fairly soon. Okay. And first, what are you noticing? What changes, if any, are you noticing in your body when you do this? And to give a little context as you write this out, as I get some feedback about what you're noticing, part of what we're playing with here is the autonomic nervous system, the way that it interacts with our experience of energy. There's a trick that you can do if you actually feel your pulse. You can play with this later. I won't have you do this right now, but if you feel your pulse while you're doing a long inhale and then a long exhale, you'll find that at specific points in the breath, the inhale will make the pulse faster and the exhale will make the pulse slower. This is not true of everyone universally. People who are chronically highly stressed will tend to have no variance. This is what's called the heart rate variability. So your ability to be in a calmer state makes the difference larger. For the most part, a longer exhale will tend to activate the calmer side of the nervous system, the parasympathetic side, which tends to make it easier for you to feel your body. Okay. I see one person mentioning calming in the upper chest, face relaxes more. Okay. Everybody else is too calm to reach the keyboard. Okay. Energy spreading downward, smooth pulse. Yeah. Cool. Minus the effect of caffeine at the moment, yeah. I feel like I'm finally comfortable in my office chair, shoulders relax, right? Mildly irritated at being told what to do, feeling song zombies turning down in my head, yeah. I have to acknowledge, Peter put that on because he was looking for, is there a cover of End of the World? And I said, actually, this particular version of zombies is fairly appropriate. Because if you listen to the lyrics are talking about how all of this stuff that you're fighting in the world, it's no matter where you go, it's still in your head. And that's the entire point of the song if you listen to the lyrics. Slowing clarity and freshness, something in my tummy unfurling, but it's still ready to clench up. Yeah. Yeah. Minus the effect of amphetamine for me. Yeah. Don't think my parasympathetic is going to engage at any point today. Emphasize prescribed, of course. Yeah. Yeah. So some of this involves using some, so what we're playing with here, physiological tricks. If you want to, you can flip it. You can make a longer inhale than an exhale. You take about 3 deep breaths of, you do that about 3 times and I can feel just from doing that much, I can feel the electricity that's going across my forearms. It can be very enlivening very quickly. So the point of touching on these is, first, I want to encourage us to start from this place that's very grounded. It's very earthed, very in the body. And the second is to recognize the way in which the physiology plays an acute role with things like what we can think and what we're inclined to think. Like one person here mentioning, I feel like I'm finally comfortable in my office chair. Like, it's funny how it takes like, it's not just sitting in the office chair. It's not even wanting to be comfortable in the office chair that creates the comfort. It's being willing to actually be here. So where I am inclined to go for today is to play with, coming from this grounding point, examining things that are a little more subtle than we were playing with last week. It's a little bit more subtle, because it's the subtler level of what is embodied about what we experience that actually controls and guides what we think and what we're willing to be aware of. But if, for the most part, we don't refine this sense, most of us do not refine the sense that allows us to notice things like, well, we go around breathing all day, every day. We can change, we sometimes even consciously change our breaths, but we don't notice, for the most part, most people most of the time do not notice the fact that even when you take a deep breath to calm down, the initial inhale is actually creating more activation. Okay? And this is good. It's actually useful, but we tend not to notice it because the effort to calm down is often in our thoughts. We're lost in our head. We're engaged in this fictitious world where I'm in a situation where I need control. How do I get control? Well, I'm going to take a breath, hit the take a breath function. Okay, body is now under control. It's almost like you're dealing with a robot. So I want to encourage us to go in the opposite direction of the robot, to start to notice when we're playing with this really subtle sense, the level at which we experience being affected by music, like the emotional tone of music. That's kind of in the body, but it's not just a body sensation. There's some more subtle tone that's going on. We're touched by the beauty of a sunset, or horrified by the fact that the kitchen needs cleaning. And there are body level reactions. And those body level reactions provide the ground for the experience. But the texture and the way that it's shaped and the way that the experience shapes our internal world and our way of thinking, all of that is much more subtle than the sense of I can feel my butt in the chair. Okay. So I'm hoping to explore this more subtle level and point out some things that hopefully are both enlivening and a little bit creepy. The subtle level is where most of the action and juice is. In terms of how this connects to this business of unsaving the world and what's involved in saving the world, I'll endeavor to connect there. But I don't want us to get lost in theory before we can feel what the theory is talking about. So if you're willing to trust me for a little bit, I want to go in that direction first. So before I launch in there, I want to give you a chance to ask any questions or bring up any concerns, anything that's alive for you, either from last week or from what we've just done so far. And in this case, you can either type it in the text or you can just raise your hand or pop up. I want to hear from you and feel you. Where are you right now? This gives me a better sense of, is this direction actually alive for you, and what adjustments might be useful for you. Curious where this will go next. Yes, more opening than I felt this morning. Cool. Okay, Sahil has a question from last week. What is your epistemic and meta-ethical core? That is, what are your implicit shoulds in service to, like be more embodied? Yeah, it's a fascinating question. There's a really basic paradox with that one, which is the question is coming from a place that is presuming a mental space. We're presuming the space of there is an epistemic and meta-ethical core. Shoulds are in service to things. This is how the world works. And then within this theory, where am I coming from? Okay. So first I want to say I'm not coming from that theory, so my answer is going to be annoying. Okay. I'm coming from truth. The mind has a real problem with this word truth. I could also say I'm coming from reality. Right? But what the mind does with both the words truth, the word truth and reality, the mind tends to do slightly different things with. With truth, it maps it to consistency with the model that is currently tagged as the one I consider to be right. Okay? That's a different question from, can I feel my feet? Right? So asking these mental questions, and it's fine to ask the mental questions. I just want to highlight, oh, this question is very mental. It's coming from a mental space. And the mental space is made possible by a context. My desire is to orient to what is real. And then from what is real, I can see my mind doing these constructions. And then I can orient to things like, what do I mean by epistemic? What do I mean by meta-ethical? What is this doing? I can feel and see the ground that it's built on, that it's always been built on, and that I've always known it's built on. This thing gets to this business of, well, what does the mind do with the word real? And this is another place where there's a tendency for a split. When I say true, I'm talking about, well, what is real here? Okay. But when the mind takes true, it's talking about consistency. When I say real, the thing I mean is this. Okay. But what the mind does with real is, again, it has a mental model of what counts as real. Like if you really believe in the physics model of the world, you then take the physics model of reality, call that real, and then ask, well, how is this idea set you're doing relating to this theory of physics? I can do that. I can do the mental gymnastics, but I'm doing it from somewhere. So everything I'm doing is about rooting in where the from is. So from here, we can go into the philosophy of epistemic and meta-ethical questions. I'm not going to do that right now. But coming from here, I have a way of answering those questions rather than just doing consistency computations in the mind. Okay, let's see. So rest is excited by the clarity of facilitation, directions going, great quiet, feel open, engaged. I'm feeling ontological aloofness. I have no idea what that means, but that sounds excellent. And then there's a comment I noticed last week that every time I tried to think about what it would be like to feel that the body knows more than the mind, but all that I could do was explore the mind models of the body knows more than the mind. Yes! Beautiful. This is perfect. This is true of almost everybody. I get sucked into that mode as well. Like being really conscious of that process. So here's the thing. How do you know? From where are you knowing that all you can do is explore the mind models of the body knows more than the mind? Where is the knowing coming from? Okay. Part of the trick there is to notice there are two directions to go in with answering any question. You can try to answer it with words, with ideas, with models, going, oh, well, I know it because blah, 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 blah. Or you can pause and notice, that there's an experience of where the knowing comes from. The same thing as, can I feel how, like, how do I feel my shirt moving as I breathe? I can go up into the mind going, well, I feel it with these properties because I have this nervous system, and the nervous system reports to my brain, blah, 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 blah. That's going up into thought. But there's a going down into experience where I answer the question by looking at experience. So in that same way, you can look down into, where is the knowing coming from? How do you know you're looking at a mental model? If you answer that question as a koan, if you answer it by going down into experience, you get in touch with the root of knowing, the foundation of where all of your knowing comes from in the first place. And then, because of what you described, the mind goes, great, I now have a model of this. My mind does this too. Right? So it just takes a while of practicing rooting in the body. Okay, so from feeling all this, I want to continue to go in this direction of playing with the subtle. When I use the word subtle here, I'm actually being reasonably precise. I'm distinguishing the subtle from the physical. This is meant to be a map of experience. Right? So for those who are getting allergic mimetic reactions to, hey, wait, is it going to be talking about mystical energy or something like that? Well, the short answer is yes, but this doesn't have to violate any sacred paradigms. It will eventually, but not the way that you think. So it turns out that when you root in truth, no paradigm survives. But what I mean when I'm talking about subtle versus the physical is this same thing that I was describing before, that you can feel things like, when you're listening to music, there's the physical level of, you can feel, particularly if the bass is strong, you can feel the thrumming in your body, and you are hearing the sounds. And that's the physical level. The subtle level is, like somebody was mentioning, wow, how somebody actually managed to make the song Zombies even more depressing. Right? So what sense are you using to feel the depressingness of the song? Okay? It's not a physical sense. Andre says, that was me. I'm using my depression. Yeah, the sense of how do you feel depression in your own body? It's not because, it's because there is a sinking feeling in my core. That's true. Maybe. I mean, when I have felt depressed, there's been this kind of sludge-like feeling throughout my body. But the sludge-like feeling is more subtle in a particular way than the sensation of sitting on the chair. Okay? Same kind of thing. When I'm with somebody and I like them, where is the liking coming from? How do I experience the liking? If I get a feeling like, man, this person, I don't know why, but I just trust them. You can analyze afterwards what kinds of signals they gave off that maybe your subconscious mind did a computation on. But the feeling of trustability is a vibe they are giving off. So when I'm talking about the subtle level, I'm talking about the structure of experience that allows us to feel that level of thing. The way that New York feels different from Seattle. How do you know it feels different? Right? Well, because you do. The same way you know how it feels different to sit in a chair versus standing up. You know it by direct experience. Okay. Cool. So first I want to check to see, like, this is some theory, and I want you to notice as we talk about this theory, can you feel how, I imagine most people here in the course of me talking about this forgot the sensation of their feet. Right? The feet on the floor. Maybe not everybody, maybe not most people, but I just want you to notice, to the extent that this is true for you, can you notice the way in which talking about the theory, this goes into these mind worlds. the way that the mind is isolated from the physicality, the way it is isolated from the present moment. Okay? This is not a necessary attribute of talking about theory, but it's a tendency, it's a habit. It's sort of like an addiction. It's like the way that we get sucked into watching television and we sort of get lost in a world. Okay? So I want to invite you to take a breath. And then I'd like to hear from as many as want to comment in the chats, but I'd love to also hear a bit of voice from like 1 to 3 people. How is this landing for you? What's happening for you? Do you have any questions or concerns that are arising for you as we go into this? One thing I just love to note, because I can't always tell when this happens, how much of this is my projection and how much is sensing the room. And as a teacher, I'm very familiar with this phenomenon of turn to the group and say, does anybody have questions? And then suddenly there's this almost frozen aspect of everybody going, right? So that quality of, oh, can't speak. Oh, shoot, should I speak? Oh, I dare not. And that is another aspect of the subtle level. The quality that the group feels of, oh, well, like, is anybody going to say anything? Well, it's kind of awkward when no one says anything. I see you, Rose. Thank you. And I just want to quickly mention before you say your thing, when I say that, I don't mean it as a judgment. And I don't mean it as pressure. I mean it to highlight there's a lived experience here that we have all the time, but that notice how it governs without us being conscious of what it's governing. Okay. All right.
I
Rose.
wonder if I could, I'll share.
George, can I pause you first?
Yeah.
Rose is right ahead of you. Okay, go for it, Rose.
Yeah, what came up for me is curiosity around how my feelings map to physical sensations. And so it's like, okay, I'm feeling this. Where is that in my body? And just noticing that and paying attention. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, go for it, George.
Well, what I was going to say is just listening to you, I think that there's, I get what you're saying around the shared sort of vibe and experience of the group. And there is a limitation, I wonder, or I feel, being on a electronic platform. There's a lack of intimacy that's missing that you would have when you're bodily present to the other. And I wonder whether that experience of actually being bodily present with each other makes the experience of what you're describing as far as whether people want to share different, whether it removes us from each other in some way. That lack of the body, in other words, there's something very important about the body in physical proximity that isn't captured through Zoom in this quite the same way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to highlight that the subtle experience of the quality of the social space is there regardless of whether we're in the same physical space or not. But it is harder for us to sync up when we aren't in the same physical space because we're used to, like as primates, we have this very basic way of mirroring off of each other and having the sense of our physical shared sense of community. So that subtle layer ends up being a much broader bandwidth of communication rather than just something that ends up being this cloak that we're wearing individually. One of the more bizarre effects that we have with this kind of interface is the impression that we're all sort of in the same room, but each one of these boxes has almost no spatial relationship that reflects where the boxes are on the screen. I'm using a gallery view, so I'm able to see at least a decent number of people. And this is part of why at the beginning I asked if you can, please turn on your video, because at least there, when I'm in gallery view, I can see a lot more of you. I can have a little bit more of a sense of in-touchedness. But there's this illusion that I'm looking at a bunch of faces that are looking at me, and that's kind of true. But like for instance, if somebody's face is actually turned this way in order to face their camera relative to my body, it's going to look like they're over here. And so there's this disembodied spatial weirdness that is hard to physically relate to. And that totally affects the quality of the subtle interactions here. Tim, you had your hand up.
Yeah, something you said a little earlier, which struck me as an observation about my bodily reactions. I've just come out of a very stressful period, and I just thought there was something wrong with me. But you're talking about the electricity through the arms. I've also felt very much through my thighs, and it was very, I just, what is this? What is going on? And I'm sure it was just stress related. My body was speaking, but I really didn't know what it was articulating. But maybe at the start of understanding is what you just said. So thank you for that.
Absolutely welcome. Yeah, I've personally discovered that the more that I listen to my body, both the physical level and the subtle level, these two are not strictly distinct, I want to emphasize. There is kind of a continuum, but it's helpful for languaging purposes to talk about them as separate. The more that I attend to really feeling them, the more information I get, and the more I realize that I can anchor in a place that is outside of the mind. And the thing of, well, what is it trying to say is a mental question. And that I actually know a lot more of my body's vocabulary than my mind does. We'll fuzz the question of who am I then? This gets into some pretty weird places that are actually even more subtle than the subtle level I'm talking about. And they're absolutely worth going into, but it's beyond the scope of what we're going to be able to cover today, what we're going to be able to touch on. But I find that this language and this knowing, yeah, I like the term somatic trust too. That's a great contribution, Leo. Yeah, it's like this willingness to listen gives me the signal becomes the meaning. And it's a kind of direct sense of being in touch with, oh, that tingling. I can feel the meaning fairly directly. And over time, I sort of develop a deeper and deeper somatic awareness, where when I say somatic here, I mean both the physical body and, if I dare say, the subtle body as well. The body that is impacted by emotions and circumstances and art and so on. And the body that's impacted by thought. The body that's impacted before the physical body, or the level of the body that's impacted before the physiological levels get notice it. See, Tim asking, and I'm going to want to go on in a moment, but I like this question. Is this difference between spirit and self? Yeah, so the word spirit in a lot of different traditions ends up going in, well, actually, let me rewind a second. I want you to notice first from what place that question is asked, and where diving into the question pulls your focus. The reason I said that is that I just noticed myself sliding more strongly into mind, and I don't mind. I'll go ahead and answer this in a moment. But for the purposes of what I want us to become viscerally aware of here, it is more important to notice what engaging with ideas and thoughts and processes actually does in real time than it is to have any specific theory. Okay. This may be different for different people, but for me, when I read, is this difference between spirit and self? I notice, for me, the model that I have of Tim, not knowing Tim at all, just like a person, where would a person have asked that question? Oh, they have a mental model, and they're wanting to verify whether their mental model is reflective of what I am talking about, which is fine. It's just important to notice, oh, the energy went through the mind to articulate the question. And then when I receive the question, I then notice, because that's how I receive it, that's the implicit context in which I get it. They're not asking, wait, so where is this subtle level? They're not asking, how do I feel it? The question is, how do I relate this to a mental theory? That's how I receive the question. And so then my energy goes into my mind in order to start answering that question. And I can feel that as kind of a lessening of the detail of the subtle level, and a little bit of distraction from peripheral stuff. Like I can start to easily, if I go back to my body, I can find corners of my body that I lose track of. So noticing that movement is far more important than the answer to any of these questions. Okay, and you may not have the same movement. I'm just describing my movement. Okay. So to answer the question, is this difference between spirit and self? The word spirit in different traditions means different things. Sometimes spirit and soul are used equivalently, and sometimes they're used distinctly. If we're going to distinguish between spirit and soul, I know you didn't say soul, but I'm going to give a quick map here. What I am distinguishing is the physical body, the subtle soul, and the causal spirit. Now, spirit, in this case, when I use the word causal, I'm actually borrowing from a bit of Buddhist philosophy where they talk about, usually the word for physical is gross, but they mean this like gross weight. Gross, subtle, causal are 3 levels of existence. And there are levels of existence that are part of lived experience. This is not exactly a claim about the true structure of reality. It's a description of the lived experience of consciousness, which, if you think it's the true structure of reality, then means that this is reflecting something deep about the structure of reality, but that's all mental. Okay. The point of this is to have a map of experience that you can touch it. There is something more subtle than subtle that is something like, where are you seeing from? There is this point of view from behind your eyes where you are experiencing things. Who is experiencing? The answer to that question is more subtle than the feeling of the energy of a musical piece. It is more subtle. It ends up being called causal for reasons I don't want to really get into here. That level, that causal level, is itself still another container. If you imagine the physical body holds the subtle body, which holds the causal body, which would be physical body, subtle soul, causal spirit. The causal spirit, the causal body itself is still a container. What is a container for is the self. And this is different from the subtle mental structure that uses the terms like I, me, my name is Michael. That's all mental stuff at the subtle level. Okay. The self that is beyond that, beyond the scope here. But the really short version is either everything, consciousness, or nothing, depending on what angle you want to view it from. And the mind will very quickly come up with illusions of understanding faster than is actually useful. Okay, and so now my having done that, how does your body feel? How much of the change in your body did you choose? Okay. So this is getting to the core of what I wanted to point at today, where I wanted to guide attention. Okay. I can come to you with ideas. And if I can ensnare your attention, then I can control what's happening in your body. Now, that makes me sound like an all-powerful wizard. Okay. And maybe I am. but this is not unique. Thanks, Peter. Peter says he is. But the point of illustrating this, yes, Nathan highlights this, happens to us every day. This is not about even whether an individual is coming in with some kind of malicious intent. This is observing the fact that it is possible for there to be an outside influence that controls whether or not you are in touch with your ground of knowing. You have this business of being able to, for instance, earlier we were reflecting on being able to feel this distinction between having a mental model of being in touch with the body versus being in touch with the body. There is a knowing that there is a difference, and knowing that you're getting sucked into the models. That knowing is coming from a ground. It is coming from something foundational. If you're disconnected from that foundation, then all you have are these mental spinnings. You just have the mental imperative to create consistency. The mental imperative to manage to make its world model work. It rarely has one. It's usually much more fragmented. The mind is part of the tool mechanism that produced this, that produced the Zoom interface. It's the mind that allows us to create this illusion of there being a room that we're all in and being able to see all these faces as though we are all having this conversation. And in a way we are. But each one of these boxes is in a dramatically separate physical space. And the fact that that isn't felt as real is part of the hallucination of the mind. It's part of the way that the mind can bridge over the cracks in its own worldview. I referred to this last week. And this is in terms of, for instance, my girlfriend lives near Paris right now. Right? But in terms of how my mind does that, Paris might as well be as spatially related to my body as Hogwarts. Right? I can even say Paris is to the east. Okay, great. And then I can start to notice something like, well, that way's east. So that means Paris is that way, right? Well, it turns out that that's false. That if you actually look at a globe and you get a sense of the spatial relationship, Paris is about 40-ish degrees below the horizon to the northeast. I'm near Seattle, by the way. So that kind of, the way in which the mind doesn't care about the fact that that spatial relationship has real meaning, but can instead create these pockets of, my girlfriend is near Paris, and here I am. Oh, and there is some kind of spatial relationship between them. That fragmented nature means that when we're living in these worlds where we're trying to create consistency, it's very possible for us to live in multiple worlds that are all fragmented and to not notice the fragmentation. Okay. So I see some nods. So I can get the sense that this is making sense. This is landing. This is making conceptual sense. How do your bodies feel? What's happening in your bodies as we talk about this? Alex mentions compartmentalization. Yeah, that's true and of the mind. Yeah. Feeling energized. Yeah. Exciting. Warm, intimate. Yeah, for me, I get this kind of an electricity and energy as I talk about this, in part because my mind notices, and here are the 5 connections that go to this implication, and my body feels some of the alertness of that. And if I'm not careful, by which I mean if I'm not consciously choosing to attend to my somatic and subtle senses, I will find myself going into the theory and losing track of what my body is doing. because that's where the energy flows. It's almost like I, whatever I am sitting on this river of energy, and the energy moves into the mind, and then I sort of get splashed around this, like this energy water ride. Right? And then I have to choose to sort of paddle a little bit in order to stay in touch with the energy of the body, in part so that the thoughts are grounded in reality, so that I don't get lost in consistency and theory and words, but instead I'm talking about and feeling into what matters right now. Let's see, I'm squirted-eyed tense because fragmentation is bad. Yeah. Mind bringing in the judgments and that creating a sense of discomfort in the body. Yeah. I get a lot more out of watching your face and also the faces of the others on the screen. Yeah. To me, it feels so much more real to see people than it does to just be like the format in Zoom where I'm just basically seeing my face while I'm talking drives me a little crazy. Because then I become self-obsessed and get all this egoic stuff revving up. Okay, cool. So at this point, we have enough pieces for me to connect this over to this business of saving the world and unsaving the world. Okay. So last week I gestured towards, if you hold this kind of embodiment and then you look around and you ask what needs saving. Like one phenomenon that happened very quickly was this going up into mind theory. There's a disconnect. If you stay with the physicality and you look around and you ask what needs saving, there's a kind of, for me, there's a feeling of almost like a vibration of like, that doesn't make sense. It's like asking what needs to be purple. It's almost a type error. Like I say, a type error, it comes from my background with computer science. It's like a description. The question doesn't fit the scenario. This energy of saving. We need to save the world. Oh, we're dealing with this meta crisis. And sense making is breaking down globally. Right? When we say these things, what happens in the body? Is the energy moving more into the body and into clarity of the now and into what is true right now? Or is the energy moving more into the mind and into theories and into anticipations? Or is it going somewhere else? For most people, from what I can tell, the energy is either disconnect, not interested, and don't want to deal with thinking about those theories. Right? It's a recognition of a kind of discomfort, but the discomfort is, okay, done. Or, and I think this is a lot of what draws people to spaces like the Stoa, there is this getting sucked into, yeah, what do we do? How do we do? Like, this is awful. Did you know about this awful piece? That particular one I think is really worth highlighting. The fact that there's almost this, this fetish or in circles like this, and it's not unique to the Stoa, it's not unique to Rebel Wisdom. Like I encountered this in the Bay Area with people who were getting all terrified around about human extinction by the development of artificial intelligence that becomes smarter than humans. It doesn't matter what mechanism you're looking at when you're saying we need to save the world. I keep observing this popping up of a kind of fetishization of terror. There'll be this business of, oh yeah, and here's the reason why it's awful and we're screwed in this way, and it's worse than you think because here's this thing that Facebook does, and then you have all these foreign countries who even employ Facebook's advertising algorithms to do A/B testing to figure out which things will allow them to do tactical strikes on cultures, and then we can't even talk about it because those get labeled as conspiracy theories, and so it's all so much worse than you think. So for me, the absolutely most core question here is not what do we do about this horror show, but rather where in me is emerging the inclination to talk about and amplify such things, and B, the response to that conversation coming from. Maybe I should swap the order, but Both of them are important. Noticing that there is something in me that becomes activated, something in me that becomes alive at the subtle level. And that subtle level, one of the first movements it does, this is to me the core of what the actual meta-crisis is. The actual essence of the meta-crisis, from what I can tell, is people's willingness as individuals to let their focus get swept as a current away from the ground of truth and into models. That's it. If we stopped doing that, the whole thing would evaporate. That's a big claim, and this would require a whole bunch of modeling and detailing. But in part because I'm right, I don't want to go into it because I want to show you. I want you to feel this. Part of my hope here in highlighting these experiences and making them alive and active and lived for you, or encouraging you. I'm not really doing it. I'm just pointing. You're looking. But what I'm hoping for you to do is to notice. I wish Brexit would evaporate. Okay. So what I'm hoping is that by making all of this more conscious, you will notice through your life, in your day-to-day, when you're reading stuff like, okay, Daniel Schmachtenberger comes up with a new deep theory of how deeply fucked we are. Okay. And he's brilliant at it. He's like one of the best minds for this that I have ever seen. And I keep noticing that when people come away from his discussions, they come away feeling kind of like, well, now what? Okay. And it's not that there's damage being done necessarily. It's tracking what is the actual essence, what is the motive force, what is the actual causal structure of where our attention goes. So the reason that is so critical, like I hope you can feel it. I hope that this is ringing in your body. Like, actually, well, you know, I'm getting enough flavor here. But at any point, if you have a question or a comment you want to pop in with, go ahead and write it down. I'm wanting to highlight a little bit of theory and then ground again, and then I want to focus on Q&A or discussion. I think discussion might be a better way of talking about it, but I'm happy to make it Q&A. So I want to offer a little bit of theory to highlight this, so to highlight something. Track your body here. Track how your body is relating to the theory. That's much more important than the theory itself. When we talk about memetics, memes, how these ideas spread, look at these movements, like in the Black Lives Matter movement, this concern around censorship that's spreading everywhere. Before all the chaos of 2020, we had all these issues around climate change and being able to get on the same page on climate change. Like any one of these issues and any one of these kinds of social movements, where is the power for the movement coming from? Try not to go up into theory. The movement here to answer that question is when you use your mind to call up something like the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay? You mentally call it up and then feel your body, particularly at the subtle level, but the subtle and physical, so to feel what the response is. What does the energy do? How do you relate to it? If you do this for enough of them, it takes time. This kind of sensitization work and becoming conscious of this takes time. This is not at the speed of mind. Mind can do very fast calculations. You can say things, you can describe things, you can spell out models, you can end up with pictures. This is part of the reason why we have the speed of the world we do. Because if you disconnect from the body and you go into the mind, then you can say things really quickly and it can feel really insightful and then But yeah, I see Tim doing this, right? It's not grounded. So what we're looking at here is, what is the grounding? All of the power comes from below. All of the power for anything comes from below. Action is physical. Physical action comes from the subtle. You can learn to feel this. That's where the power is. You can't control the power with thought. Thought is a byproduct of power fueling the mind. So the global situation that we're in, part of the reason we have this picture is because of a lot of energy like, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to do what's right. But it's being focused on these mental pictures. So the energy becomes in service of an idea. And as long as we embody that kind of hovering in this picture, what we embody is the energetic movement of going into the mind and getting lost in ideas. And that's what spreads. There's a game theoretic reason for it. We can go into the theory of it, the evolutionary theory of it. Memes evolve just like creatures do. It's perfectly fair to say that there are subtle entities that have no physical bodies, but instead possess physical bodies. That's what a mob is. A mob is a mass possession of a group of people by a subtle entity. You can view it that way and then apply evolutionary theory to subtle entities. It's every bit as valid as looking at a cat and saying, I think the cat is alive. Well, the cat's really molecules, right? But it makes sense to call the cat an entity. Okay. What makes something an entity is something like its ability to intentionally choose self-preservation. And Andre says you wouldn't say that if you saw my cat. Yeah, we have 3 cats in this house. One of whom has 2 cats in that cat, and you can watch them switch between the 2 cats. One is a sweetheart that loves to cuddle, and the other is completely insane and wants to destroy you. And then we have another cat where there are no cats in that cat. I'll sometimes go out to the bathroom in the middle of the night and find him just staring at the wall. Okay, so the I could say more about the theory of all of that, what's going on with the subtle entities and so on. Part of the reason I mention any of this is to just plant seeds in the mind in a way that is related to somatic awareness. If you go around your life and you are attentive to the subtle level, and this idea of, oh, there's something like, there's an energy that arises. If you watch the news, okay, I recommend that you do not watch the news unless and until you can feel what the news is doing to you in real time in your body. Until then, it's just possessing you. It just becomes a vector for these subtle entities to control your mind. That's what it's for. I'm not meaning to speak from conspiracy at all. You don't need conspiracy. In fact, if there were people who were intending to do this, you would just be recursing on the question, why are those people doing it? What causes them to decide that that is the thing to do? And there's something that you can learn to feel. It's absolutely real. It is every bit as real as the feeling of your chair on your skin. It is every bit as real as culture. You can learn to feel it, and if you can feel the influence in real time, then you can notice what it feels like to have a subtle body infection and to feel the energies of something that wants to take over your mind arise in your body and push you away from your somatic knowing into a realm of shattered theory. When you can feel that, then you stand a hope of knowing what world you're even in and what good is. Until that happens, any attempt to save the world is going to be in service of some sort of insane God that you don't even know about. But that's theory. My hope is that you can learn to feel it. You can learn to make these senses much more conscious. Okay. So with that, I invite us to take a breath. Check in with yourself first. Don't bother writing anything at this point. I just want you to feel. How's your body doing? What do you feel? Okay. Now, I'd like to just open this up for hearing and feeling impacts, and any questions or areas of, as one old colleague of mine used to put it, questions, comments, snide remarks. But part of my hope here is also to feel where y'all are. So if it's just a matter of, this is how it's landing in my body, I don't even know what it means, but this is what's real for me right now, that's absolutely welcome. We're landing on Earth here. So I'd like to open it up. In this case, I'd prefer to hear your voices rather than have them typed. Although if you have a question and you're concerned about getting it in queue, go ahead and type it. Yeah, Tim, go for it. Oh, by the way, I can't see everybody because I can only see 25 people at a time. So if you happen to be off screen and you raise your hand, I might not see. So feel free to read the social scene and speak. And if it's out of turn or if I notice that there's something off, then I'll moderate. It's fine. Go for it, Tim.
Yeah, I'm just admiring Andre's cat. No, I just may mention in the chat actually that I've had some issues to deal with, which I recognise were to do with terror, inner terror, and I, as well as getting a few treatments here and there, I did check out once again Batch Flower Remedies, and their rock rose is their flower remedy for terror. And what they suggest, what Batch suggested, was that if you can overcome the terror, you actually get into a space of fearlessness. And I thought that was, for me, that was empowering, and I could recognize how I've actually moved, because I could recognize the terror, put it in its right place, and that fearlessness develops. So, that fetishization of terror that you mentioned was, that's spot on. And especially with the TV news and all of the other stuff, and you just need to come back to
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I want to add 2 notes there to that. I love this point. One is that terror is an immensely powerful, subtle energy. It's really strong. Okay? And that's one of the reasons it gets used so often. So many memes end up creating, and in biology, it's called convergent evolution. A bunch of different memes will use terror in order to hook. You'll notice this, probably an interesting example is QAnon. QAnon tried to, the memeplex for that evolved to emphasize the torture, rape, and killing of children in order to vilify a certain segment of the population, in order to provide a map of a conspiracy that would allow you to feel an engagement of meaning. Right? So that sense of outrage and horror and fear, and like these monsters are in control of all of the finance and power of the world. And what are we going to do? That the terror energy is what sweeps people away from their somatic knowing into their minds. But that is not a property of terror. That is a property of an unwillingness slash a lack of cultivation for staying with the intensity of the energy. There's a very clear, lived, subtle experience that is how much energy can your subtle body hold before you check out, before you vent the energy into whatever method is offered to you. This is where entertainment shows up of like, I feel too many uncomfortable feelings, let me watch TV and get distracted. Like that's why entertainment has this distraction structure. It is because most people have not developed the subtle body strength needed to hold these energies. I feel scared. I need comfort. I need some, let me eat all of this food so that the physical sensation of eating can distract me from the feeling of fear and insecurity and inadequacy that is present in my subtle level. So a huge amount of the puzzle that we're looking at is not just, oh, there is terror and how do you get rid of the terror? It's can you be scared shitless and fine? This is not a question of value. This is a question of what you build up to. This is like saying, do you even lift? Like it's a question of how do you relate to the energies that move through your body? When the energy gets to a level that's kind of uncomfortable, like if you're trying to lift a heavy weight, do you just go, oh, that's too heavy for me, I can't lift that? Or do you lift a weight that is heavier than is comfortable in order to make yourself stronger from time to time, so that when you need to lift something, you can? Exactly the same thing is happening at the subtle level. It's just that we have a culture that is completely numb to the subtle level. So subtle strength is unknown. Okay. So wanting to emphasize that it's not a matter of becoming fearless. Courage, courage, like from the French cœur, which is for the heart. Courage is heartfulness. It is my care providing more space and power than the fear takes up. Okay. So courage is something that you cultivate. It is a strength. So that's one point. The other point I want to add is when I'm talking about the fetishization of terror, I include spaces that are like the people who are concerned about the meta crisis, not universally, but pretty close to universally. Like where this had started to pound me in the face was in listening to, I think even just yesterday, I was listening to a video from the Dark Horse podcast with Brett and Heather Weinstein. Brett was, it was in an interview, I forget the guy's name, but he coined the term the Zuckerberg Institute of Virology. I was talking about mimetic virology, mind viruses, and the culture viruses. And the video clip ended with Brett emphasizing, no, it's actually worse than you think, because, and that was actually where I got that example from, of foreign countries being able to use the advertising A/B testing structure of Facebook, to use Facebook's mind hacking optimization in order to test which methods of cultural impact other countries want to use on American culture. So he was bringing that in, saying, look, we've got something there that like nobody can even control. And we even have it distributed so that it's Facebook and Google and Twitter and Instagram. And like all of these are in sort of a race to the bottom. So the question is, what could a solution even possibly look like? And that was the end of the video. So now in saying all of that, what do you notice your body reacting like? Right? So there's one thing to say, oh, there's this problem that is worth attending to. Oh, it seems like we are in danger of destroying a lot of common resources that we really care about. And to really feel that and to go, oh, this matters. It's quite another thing to go, ah, the sky's falling, ah, right? And to notice the difference between those two, and the way that when you don't have the capacity to hold the fear will vent along known pathways, which are usually defined by culturally infected mimetic structures, to vent your attention into the mind and into theory. That's the most common direction that I see. So we end up ungrounded and panicking, but pretending not to panic because we're figuring it out. Okay. I have a PM here, someone pointing out, oh, I think this might be you implicitly defining burnout. I think that's a reasonable description. It's like if you keep trying to act from panic without grounding your body, that's one way you can end up with burnout. And that's a foundational energy that trying to save the world tends to produce. You'll go into the mind out of some sort of fear-based, usually a fear-based theory, and then try to live in that theory without giving the body a chance to recuperate and to speak its truth. You do that for years, you will not have a functional body. Okay, I think I saw a hand and it looks like the hand went down. Okay.
Can I go?
Looks like you're going, go for it.
Yeah, this is Sahil who asked you the question in the beginning. So first of all,
With Sahil, you're cutting out.
hello. Can you hear me fine?
You look like you're back now. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Cool. Yeah, I'm loving everything you're saying. I'm trying to run like an embodied book club for a local EA chapter. So all of this is gold for me. I'm a little confused and maybe a little impatient about where you are and who you're addressing this to. So like, it seems like you're giving us like a basic embodiment course. And then after that, you will get to the juicy stuff where the misalignment will happen, where we have like first-person truths that aren't calibrated with like third-person truths about the world, and then what to do in that situation. Because it feels to me like you couldn't just get more and more aligned. You probably go insane from all the suffering in the world, for one. And for another, you're just a squishy brain. It's probably not possible. So that's like that's just a confusion about where you are and how you're structuring this, and whether this is a question that's even something you're trying to answer right now. Actually, and I have other follow-ups, but maybe I'll go with that one first.
Yeah, I like the question. It highlights it highlights exactly the thing that I am trying to focus on, but it's not in the content of what you just said. So I think a pretty big arcing structure of where I want to come from. See if I can say it. I've never tried to say this, so we'll see how this works. All action and power comes from a single point. This is something that you can learn to experience directly. Everything that you think you are doing that is not going through that point is a description of how much of your personal power, how much of your physical energy is going into hallucinations. And what I am observing in terms of what the actual problems are that we're trying to deal with, to the extent we want to say there are actual problems, here are the issues, here's what we're dealing with. All of them come from mechanical results of hallucinations interacting according to evolutionary law. But we don't have power at that level. We only have power over that single point. What I am trying to do is encourage awareness of that point, which as I do so, is going to cause all of the noise mechanisms that are currently your personal mimetic infections from the culture. Your personal belief that you have a self who has a name, who wanders around and is trying to do things in the world, your beliefs about different ideas, your beliefs about what is true, all of that stuff ends up having varying degrees of mimetic immune responses to the process of focusing on that single point because it is threatening to cut off their food source. When you get to that point and you get it and you deepen the devotion to that one point, everything else becomes possible. To the extent that these theories relate to the world, that they actually reflect the world rather than being a private psychotic hallucination. All of them have a varying degrees of psychosis. That's how they work. Right? But to the degree that it is an accurate map of the world, the accuracy becomes relevant to the connection to that point. In exactly the same way that my intention can cause my fingers to move. And this is novel. It was not true when I was born. I had to learn how to do this in detail. I had to learn how to control my body. Right? That learning is the process of getting in contact with reality, which only comes through that single point. I see Steve Henry asking, are you going to give us an experience of the point? Kind of. First off, I can't give you anything. All I can do is point at it. Second, that's what I've been doing. I've been doing it in a trajectory that I expect to be approachable. Because if I just say, oh, notice that you have intention, and then focus on the intention. The thing that happens for most minds by default is to take a concept of intent and then focus on the concept. And then all the attention and all the energy goes to intent. And this gets intertwined with energies that are related to should and obligation, to the feeling of force, the need to make things happen, and it all gets all this bumbly gumbly gook. But that feels like, oh, well, that must mean what he's talking about, and let me connect it to this other stuff. But if you actually feel the point of free will, what your actual lived experience of free will is, it is vastly narrower. It's much, 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 much narrower than your mind claims. Because your mind is using this concept of what I can choose, what free will is, where my emotions are. What the mind is using ignorance of cause and effect as the domain that it is calling choice. So when you actually zoom in on what can you actually control, most of what you find is much, 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 much narrower than you think. Vastly narrower than you think. You can't even control what you think. Okay? But there is a single point of control. There is a single point of choice. Anything you do that isn't asking the question, how does this relate to that point, is a waste of energy from the perspective of getting that point to affect your world. But it being a waste of energy is irrelevant unless the waste of energy relates to that point. Okay? So everything I'm doing is trying to encourage you to use your own inner senses to ground in truth so that you can see reality for what it is. And then you can see what aspects of all of these theories even matter. But you can't do it the other way, because from where are you doing it? All action, one very visceral way to notice this is that all action is physical. So if it doesn't relate to what you can physically do right now, not what you can physically do in theory a week from now, that's an idea. What you can do in your body right now. If it doesn't relate to that, then it's a mental construction. And if it doesn't look like a mental construction to you, then you are hallucinating. And that too is an idea. Can you see it? Does that answer your question?
So, I mean, post this enlightenment, it's not like you can stop making maps, right? You wouldn't be able to feel that you need to wear a mask in a pandemic. You wouldn't be able to model. You would still have to model how population dynamics would work. It's still the case that you would have to continue map making, right? You're not saying give up I think you said this explicitly in the last video, that you're not saying just give up the mind. You still want to use it. You just want to be aware that it is
not
in
at all.
fact only a hallucination or whatever. So there are useful fictions, and you must still feel a misalignment from the fact that there are things that you don't recognize as the things that need to be doing after you figure out what really matters. There's still misalignment, which is going to last forever because you're just a squishy little brain, and you're not going to magically map the whole world into your brain. That's never going to happen. I think you agree with me there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
what do you do with the misalignment later? Don't you have to override? You still have to override your intuitions and follow scripts,
I don't think
follow
so.
maps that can tell you how to behave in an environment that you're not used to, I think, right?
No.
Okay.
The reason it looks like that is that question is coming from the mind. The mind is trying to figure out how to do all of this. The mind can't. That's the whole point. You're not coming from the mind figuring out how to get the mind's ideas to embed in the body so that the body can correctly fuel a modeling that the mind is doing. It goes the other way. The ground of truth is now. It is in your somatic experience. This is how you know what true means. When you look at something like modus ponens, when you look at logic, when you look at models, the reason you can say that model makes sense to me, the reason we use the word makes sense is because it is sensible. It is capable of being sensed. It is sensory. It is grounded in something about our lived experience. Okay? All truth grounds in the body. That is what truth means. The mind is a sense extension tool. The problem is that the mind is also Turing complete, which is to say anything that, well, within mechanical limitations like finite memory, but for all practical purposes, anything that can be computed, a mind can compute, which means it's possible to write viruses for the mind. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with mind viruses. Some of those mind viruses result in us as somatic, incarnate, visceral, wet, squishy beings, as you say. But it's not just squishy and soft. It's also ferocious. It's animalistic. It's primal. It's pleasurable. It's here. And it's power. This has come to believe the mind too much and to hand control of what makes sense to the mind. The mind is not by default grounding in truth. It is operating according to these mass infections. Our mimetic immune system is shit. Part of what I'm doing is pointing out you can consciously build an intelligent mimetic immune system. But the mind can't do it. So giving that as a theory doesn't help yet. It will later. But it has to be grounded in the visceral experience of blood and lust and existence and breath. When you have that, and then you orient to the mind, you can go, oh, when I reach out into the world and I try to make sense of like how to get together with my girlfriend physically, how do we do it? My mind is a useful extension of my senses in these ways because I can feel it. I can feel the extension. And when my somatic truth does not match the map of the world, that is a description in which the map of the world is a bad extension of my senses. There may be some somatic transformation that happens. Oh, I need to become healthier and more athletic and more powerful in order to deal with this situation. But that becomes something I can feel in my body because my mind has correctly extended my senses. It doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the body. Is that landing?
A lot of it is, and I have more follow-ups, but I've taken up too much time and someone else is raising their hand.
Cool. Pam, you've got your hand up. Oh, I want to check meta before you jump in. Peter, I'm fine with staying past the bottom of the hour, but I don't know how you want to hold this space. So where are we in terms of your curatorship?
Yeah, is it okay 10 minutes after the hour and then we'll close out, or after the bottom of the hour?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Do you want me
Cool.
to end early enough that you have a time to do an end bit, or is 10 minutes after and then hand to you fine?
Yeah, 10 minutes after and you can pass
Okay,
it to me.
sounds good. Thanks, Peter. Okay, Pam, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed when you were talking about the need to sensitize the subtle body to, for that wisdom, and that there was fear that came up. And as you went into, explanations about QAnon and, the terror in my body just, got to the point where I was actually holding my arms over my heart to kind of, try to decrease the sensitization. And so, and then I noticed, when you brought it into being embodied, then I used some breath and I used, kind of rubbing the arms, and then that's calmed down. And so, yeah, I'm really curious about strengthening the ability to, yeah, because I feel that feeling is real. The feeling sense is seems very strong in me already. And so, you know, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, yeah, I love how you ask that. Yeah, and I relate tremendously. This, what I'm hearing you describe is the idea um, of sensitizing the subtle body. Like the idea created an increase in energy in the subtle body, and that in and of itself already almost threatened to overwhelm. And then that built, as we talked about the details of these other ideas like QAnon. So part of it has to do with just like there's an intertwining between strengthening and sensitization. You can't really do them totally separately. They're part of the same process. You can emphasize one more than the other. It's a little bit like, are you going to emphasize masculine or feminine work? Well, you sort of need both of them, but you may find yourself naturally needing to lean more on one versus the other. So the part of it is just the choice to pay attention, intending to pay attention to these subtle energies. And in particular, when a theory bursts into mind, when, oh, but there's a reason to be concerned about what's going on with the environment, or but AI might actually kill us all, or I don't know, QAnon is like, they might infect the world, and they could do bad things. Great, but those thoughts are not what's driving the show. The thoughts are articulating an energy. So the choice to take the thoughts seriously, the actual honest place where taking a thought seriously comes from, is not in diving into the content, but is instead attending to the energy that is fueling the thought. So making that choice in an ongoing way, you'll find this all over the place. Like you stand up and you turn around and your subtle body will feel impacted. Can you notice? Okay. You walk through a doorway, your subtle body is impacted. Do you notice? A thought flits through your mind. Oh, right, I need to respond to that email. Your subtle body's impacted. Do you notice? So just getting really grounded in cultivating that sense. And then as you build that sensitivity, you'll start to notice a way in which, like you just described, there will be certain things that will feel like they energize you and are within your capacity, and some will be at the edge of capacity, and some will be beyond capacity. A fantastic model for this is tracking orgasm, being able to feel when you're approaching versus on the edge versus past the point of no return. Like this is actually a literal example of this process. We just treat orgasm like it's a physical thing. It is actually the physical echo of a subtle process. It is exactly the same thing. Okay? So you're learning to feel how to not tip over the edge. And this is a matter of feeling your own capacity, and in particular, not believing your thoughts about what you can or cannot handle. Part of that process includes holding a certain level of energy. The goal is not to push it as far as you can, just enough that you can feel it. And then finding ways to soothe your body. And these are, in many cases, best done at the physical level, like holding a pillow on your stomach, like wrapping yourself in a blanket, having some hot tea, doing the things that give your body a sense of, I am safe, I am here. Encouraging parasympathetic activation instead of sympathetic activation, the nervous system. Rest and digest instead of fight or flight, but not to make the energy go away, but instead to stabilize the being with. This is slow, it's organic, you are gardening. You do not garden by yanking the plants up. Like, you let it take its time to grow. As it grows and as it enriches, you will find that your capacity builds. Things that used to utterly overwhelm you will become within capacity, and then barely even a blip on your radar. It'll be, oh, I feel really pissed about that. Okay, cool. And I can deal with that rage in my body. That's fine. There's plenty of space. So that's how I understand to build it. Lots of mechanical methods, but that's the essence of it. Being within your capacity and soothing the body.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
You're very welcome. There was a question I saw in the queue here about, is there, from Stephen Henry, is there a relationship between not sensing the body and trashing the earth? Yes. I'll try to make this quick. The very slightly longer version is it's not just desensitizing the body, it's being willing to stay with the body. The body is actually already very sensitive. We're actually just being willing to be with it enough to sort of plug in those senses into our conscious awareness. The move that gives us the impression that when I am overwhelmed with something and that I can deal with it by watching a TV show or by eating or by rehearsing in my mind how wrong those people are or how fucked we are or whatever, that those distractions work. The reason is that there's a thing that I've come to refer to as faith in a way. That you can make feelings go away. You can make problems go away, as though away is a magical land where when things go there, they don't matter anymore and they can't affect you. The problem is that all of reality is interconnected, and when you have deemed some part of reality away, it ends up being hell. An example of away is landfill. Landfill is away. That's why we talk about throwing things away. You just notice the subtle energetic quality of taking a piece of trash and throwing it in the garbage. What is your emotional, somatic, subtle relationship to the object when you throw it away? For me, the striking element is it's gone. That's a degree to which I am cutting off my sensitivity to what the implications are of my actions. This is not about shame. This is about recognizing places where we could be in touch with truth and we choose something else. Okay. Another example of away is prison. We even talk about putting people away. That's why prisons are not places of reform and kindness where we find ways of helping people who didn't know how to integrate with culture to heal the emotional wounds and forms of ignorance that are necessary for them to get on their feet and be participating members of society. We don't do that because we have deemed prison a form of hell. So we put them away, and it is hellish to be there. And just like landfills are overfilling, prisons are overflowing. Same mechanism. You'll see this mechanism every place where there's faith in a way. And it ultimately roots not because in our need to, oh, well, we've got to pay attention to prisons. Oh, and we need to pay attention to what we're doing with the trash. That's an anxiety. It's a desperation to focus on the external world, to get away from the discomfort of what we are doing in our own bodies. So the place of action in all of these, the actual place of control, starts with What am I actually feeling right now? Okay, so my suspicion is that we don't have time for a full question over the course of 2 minutes, and especially not for me to answer, especially if I try to answer briefly. To respect time, I'm inclined to hand this over to Peter. So thank you everyone for this. Actually, what I want to use these last 2 minutes for, just quickly type into the chat box, I'm leaving here with. One thing you're leaving here with. And a bit more peace, leaving here with gratitude, clarity, and tiredness, leaving with contemplation, yeah, leaving here with promise, yum, it feels good in my heart, appreciation, leaving here with a sense of meaning that is real, I can feel it, good, that is really the point. We're, in some sense, solving the meaning crisis by recognizing where meaning is actually from. I'm leaving here with an increased appreciation for the physical grounding in truth. Good. Leaving with more confidence. Leaving here with the front point, or the from point. Leaving here with the from point. Leaving here with mental confusion and a weird bodily emptiness that I feel may going to change after the call. Cool. Just so you know, when I was working with this stuff initially, my mind was just constantly really befuddled because my body would say truth and my mind would say, but that's false. And here's the theory and here's all the details. And my body would go, that's great, this is truth. And then I wouldn't know what to use to choose which one to listen to. But it turns out that's secretly a little thread of mind. And when I was willing to lean into the somatic knowing just a little bit, it's a little bit of a leap of faith for me. And I think many people experience it that way. There's this experience of, oh, this machine is fucking insane. Okay, got it. And it doesn't have to be. Got it, right? So it's enormous clarity and freedom that comes from it. But the initial stages are really, especially for people like me who are really, really used to relying on the mind to do everything, like a constant prosthetic. Leaving here with a desire to live from my body, beautiful. Longing and clarity, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. I don't yet know exactly what next week is going to be. I can feel the stirring in my belly. We weren't able to figure out a good format for people to engage, so I suspect that'll happen again. There won't be something between now and the next session. If you find that you have some sort of question or some kind of feedback that you want to give me, feel free to shoot me a message at, whoa, that's bright. Every now and then my system just does that. I am tossing my email into the chat there, so you can ping me if you like. And you can also find me on Facebook. Thank you, everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael, for coming back to the Stoa. Delicious session. So come back next week, same time, same channel. And our next event is at 4 p.m. Eastern Time with Peter Jones, Sense Making the Pluriverse between Design and Dasein. I was going to play that song, that cover song on the outro, but I don't think I'm going to. I won't want to stay in my body right now. So